Costas has been a friend for 40 years and one of my closest professional friends and supporters and boosters for a quarter century. And now it is time for him to shut the up about Joe Biden. If you have missed it, Bob has begun a public crusade on national television, urging, insisting, now demanding that the president withdraw from the 2024 campaign or, quoting him, be shown the door, unquote. I do not question Bob's motives. While attacking Biden for hubris for running and the Democrats as feckless for letting him run, Bob has rightly called Trump a threat to democracy. I do not question Bob's motives. I question Bob's hubris and his fecklessness. Bob, shut the up. Because whatever Bob thinks he is accomplishing, whatever anybody else doing stuff like this thinks they are accomplishing, they are in fact accomplishing only one thing: helping Donald Trump. Period. Doing Donald Trump's work for him. Just like Jon Stewart, just like Ezra Klein, just like Bill Maher, just like Cenk Uygur, just like every other apparent liberal who has decided he and he alone knows the terrible truth, and he must remove the president of the United States from the Democratic ticket. The president who, for some reason, the Republicans also want removed from the Democratic ticket. The president who, for some reason, Trump also wants removed from the Democratic ticket. Bob Costas and Trump want Biden to be shown the door. Coincidence, no doubt. I have previously wargamed what would actually happen if Democrats tried to remove Joe Biden from the ticket now, and I will do it again in brief shortly, but I wanted to emphasize that it's not as if we do not have history to consult about what happens when somebody says something stupid like this, or when you do this, or when you just try to do this. What happens is, when you do this or you just try to do this, what happens is you lose. In 1968, the Democrats successfully undercut Lyndon Johnson, sharply enough and viciously enough and anti-Vietnam enough that on March 31st, LBJ, not 4 years removed from what was then the biggest landslide in presidential election history, withdrew. Biggest landslide in history. And after he withdrew 6 months later, instead of him, the guy with the biggest landslide in history, against the genuinely evil Richard Nixon, instead of Lyndon Johnson running for re-election after a knife fight of a primary that ended with the assassination of Robert F. Kennedy, we ran Hubert Humphrey instead of the incumbent with the biggest landslide in history. Hubert Humphrey, a dedicated and brilliant public servant with the public personality of a guy who sold vacuum cleaners door to door in a straw hat. Thank God we got that albatross LBJ off the ticket. So instead we got President Nixon and a larger war in Vietnam and Watergate and the template by which Trump presidented. It's not like there's no history about throwing your president overboard, Bob. Oh, and it's not like that's all the history, Bob, because we tried to LBJ another incumbent Democratic president. Anybody remember that? Jimmy Carter, primaried by Ted Kennedy? Because Jimmy Carter did not seem like a shoo-in for re-election, Teddy and a lot of the Democrats whom Carter had rubbed the wrong way from the beginning tried to cut Carter's legs off, and they failed. And even though it was obvious by May that Carter was not going to get his legs cut off, Kennedy kept running and trying to cut his legs off, and Kennedy did not concede until the second day of the convention, and every day he remained in the race. He wounded Jimmy Carter a little bit more in the general election campaign, and what did that get us? That got us Ronald effing Reagan. 2 terms of Ronald effing Reagan and his vice president George Bush and his vice president's idiot son George W. Bush. Oh, and 40 years of even the most virulently anti-Carter operatives realizing they had not only enabled Reagan, but they had also sabotaged the most honorable man to hold the White House in the 20th century. So there it is, Bob. We do what you keep going on television and demanding, while you insult Biden with charges of hubris, and the Democrats who will not Julius Caesar him with fecklessness, and we have two possible outcomes. We successfully LBJ Joe Biden and run a Hubert Humphrey instead and guarantee Trump wins, or we unsuccessfully LBJ Joe Biden and just damage him enough every day for the next 250 days, and we guarantee Trump wins. Your call, Bob. You want to run Joe Biden, who got 66% of the straw vote in New Hampshire, even though he wasn't on the ballot, who took the South Carolina primary by 94 points, who won Nevada by 78 points, who is projected by all the actual Moody's Analytics people to almost certainly win the general, probably by 70 or more electoral votes, without any improvement between now and November? And it was so threatening to the Republicans that first they embraced a Russian-baked plot starring a now-arrested Russian asset to impeach and remove Biden from office. And now they have segued to embracing a Trump-baked plot with a congressional hearing starring a corrupt special counsel to portray him as infirm to encourage the Democrats to remove him from the ballot. You and the Republican Trump operative special counsel are on the same side of this, Bob. So, Bob, John, Ezra, everybody else walking this tightrope, you're going to run Biden, or you're going to stab him and the 81 million people who voted for him in the back so you can run who? Kamala Harris, whose approval numbers are at Biden's levels or slightly lower, and who in the latest Emerson poll trails Trump by 3? Or are you going to knife the president and the vice president and run Gavin Newsom instead, who in the same Emerson poll loses to Trump by 10 and who, oh, by the way, won't do it anyway? Or how about the promising Gretchen Whitmer, who loses to Trump by 12? I know Michelle Obama, who wants nothing to do with this ever again. Say, Bob, I hear Dean Phillips is interested. And Cenk Uygur. How feckless are the Democrats if they realize this guy could possibly lose to Trump? Bob Costas asked rhetorically while on the Michael Smerconish show on CNN Saturday. If you do not know the Michael Smerconish show, it features a rock-ribbed conservative schmuck who, as part of his act in which he tries to con people that he's middle of the road, he never raises his voice or says anything mean. He just attacks liberals and Democrats and minorities every day for the last 20 years. And Bob went on his show. And Bob went on and on his show. Then get somebody else out there, Bob explained. You don't go into the Super Bowl with a quarterback with a dead arm. You don't do it. This is so obvious. Well, it's obvious if you don't know politics in 2024, or if you don't know political history, or if you don't know the law, or the polls, or the electoral computer models. Or just as importantly, if you don't know the processes that would have to be invented to push Joe Biden off this cliff you want to push him off of, because they do not exist. Even if this was somehow the right move and guaranteed to succeed rather than almost guaranteed to give Trump 400 electoral votes, there is no legal way to do it. When Costas first broached this while he was on with Bill Maher, and by the way, Bill Maher has now even given up pretending he knows what the hell actually happens in the world outside of his dressing room, they sort of skipped over the actual procedure for presidential nomination usurpation that Bob favored and Bill favored. Oh, is this an election year? All these guys, Costas, Maher, Stewart, the hapless Ezra Klein, who he bounced from Countdown's guest list around 2008 because he wasn't just dull, he didn't actually seem to know anything. All these guys approach that little trivial detail. Just how do you throw the sitting president of the United States off the ticket? They treated that kind of dismissively. The most specific any of them have gotten is, talk him into standing aside. And what do you do then, Bob, when Biden says no? Everybody has a plan, Bob, until they get punched in the face by Joe Biden. Quote, if Biden's hubris is such that he doesn't understand the best interest of his party and, more importantly, his country, Bob now says, then he has to be shown the door, period. Well, that settles it, Bob. I'm sorry, Jill, the president says to his wife, Dr. Biden. I was going to run and I was going to win, but then Bob Costas told me I can't run. And then he showed me the door. There is no legal process to do this. The last window to file for the remaining Democratic primaries closes in all but a handful of states on, Thursday. So you are going to remove him after he wins all the primaries and clinches all the delegates? You're going to cut his legs off at the convention, by which point he controls everything up to and including the credentials and the tickets that could get you into the convention? And even if there is some hidden parachute mechanism, some other break glass in the event of emergency process, if he wanted, Joe Biden could take you to court. So now you are not only doing Trump's bidding, Bob, by damaging Biden, and you are trying to do Trump's bidding and Moscow's bidding and Putin's bidding by getting Trump an easier opponent. Not only are you doing all that, but you're now going to split the Democratic Party into two wings. The wing with the President of the United States in it and the other wing. The Bob Costas, Ezra Klein, Bill Maher, Jon Stewart, Dean Phillips wing, which consists of 5 people, Costas, Klein, Maher, Stewart, and Dean Phillips. You know, Bob, Dean Phillips has a really iffy attendance record for stuff like this. The Costas, Klein, Maher, Stewart, Phillips wing of 5 people may only have 4 people in it. And then the 2 wings are going to sue each other 5 months before the election so you can rally the nation behind, checks notes, Democratic presidential nominee J.B. Pritzker. We haven't even gotten to that recap of the war gaming that I promised. You do it, Bob. You show Biden the door. And what happens next? What happens next is Donald Trump spends the rest of the campaign noting, correctly I might add, that he has already beaten Joe Biden, and this new guy, checks notes, Democratic nominee Cenk Uygur, he shouldn't even be allowed on the ballot. No, by the way, Bob, Biden is still on the actual ballot in every state. And maybe Trump says, now that I've beaten Joe Biden thanks to Bob Costas, we don't actually need to hold an election. I'll just take over now. And you know, he is crazy enough to try a real coup with tanks this time. Whether or not he does it, I don't know. Somebody has to show him the door, I guess. At minimum, Bob, he will not debate your Biden replacement-level presidential candidate because if you knock Biden off, 60 to 70% of the name recognition in this election will belong to Donald Trump. He's running against Marianne Williamson as the Democratic nominee? Incidentally, Bob, if you do oust Biden, are you assuming that only one Democrat will try to replace him? Or will there be so many of them rushing to get the nomination that some of them will get stampeded at the front door? No, I'm sure they'll be controlled and respectful of one another, Bob, instead of spending millions at their sudden manna from heaven gift of how to succeed to the presidency without really trying. I'm sure they will be polite and unified, and they'll operate only for the good of the party. That 28 different Democrats vied to run against Trump last time should not be considered a precedent. Plus, from what I can tell from your plan, they might even agree to just let you choose, Bob. Oh, and by the way, Bob, whoever you do choose, your Plan B replacement is now the untested, unproven, unqualified one. Suddenly, we do not have the president running versus the crazy ex-president. We have the crazy ex-president running against, checks notes, Bill de Blasio. Oh, and also, by the way, Bob, you have also made the president of the United States into a lame duck. Unless you are expecting him to outright resign, in which case Kamala Harris is the president and the presumptive nominee, unless you're intending to shiv her too. And regardless, new president, lame duck, two lame ducks. What happens to the Trump trials, Bob? Why would Trump bother to show up in court for any of them in an America run by a lame duck or a caretaker president who is going to lose by 10 points, while every day Trump gets to boast about how he has already beaten the deep state? It quit, and he has beaten the new Democratic nominee, checks notes, Roy Cooper. Or, Bob, nightmare of all nightmares, for the first time in his life, Trump says something that is not a partial or total lie. He finesses this. He pretends to be sympathetic to Joe Biden. Poor Biden. Look what the Democrats did to him. Look what Bob Costas did to him. Why, Trump says, it's an insurrection against the sitting president of the United States. I empathize with you, Democrats. You have been denied your choice. So I'd like to introduce my new vice president on a unity ticket, Joe Manchin. So those are the things that happen if you get your way. Lawsuits, a rookie presidential candidate who gets to start his campaign in March, a unity ticket on the other side, a brokered Democratic convention, or a wounded incumbent president still on the ticket. And you have handed the dictatorship of the United States to Trump by 55-45, 60-40. Or maybe you have sent half the Democratic voters to third-party candidates. So, Bob, now there's a chance RFK Jr. finishes second. And for the first time since 1912, the incumbent president of the United States finishes third in a two-man race. And if that were not bad enough, the day after the election, the opposition to Trump, which might be the last thing left between us and absolute dictatorship in this country and the end of democracy in this country, after the election, the opposition to Trump would be splintered because you, Bob, you showed Biden the door. Not great, Bob. Incidentally, I do know this has ended my friendship with Bob, and I'm sorry about that. I valued it, and I tried for several weeks behind the scenes to talk to him about what he had said on Bill Maher, and he was not listening, as evidenced by his appearance with Smerconish. I mean, the next step down from Smerconish is going on Fox News. I was going to leave one thing out of this, but I just can't, and there's really no reason to, not now. That sports analogy that he made, quote, you don't go into the Super Bowl with a quarterback with a dead arm. You don't do it. This is so obvious. That also does not work even as a sports analogy. Because what Bob is proposing is Patrick Mahomes of the Kansas City Chiefs has a dead arm before the Super Bowl, so you replace him with Tom Brady, Aaron Rodgers. Bob, they don't let you take a quarterback from a different team to replace your quarterback in the Super Bowl. You can only use your already backup quarterback, and that, in this scenario, is Blaine Gabbert. So in the Costas post-Biden world, the Democrat running against Trump and the momentum of his madness and him being the only incumbent and having all of the media and the Kremlin behind him, the Democrat who gets to run instead of Biden against that is whichever Democrat you, Bob, think is Blaine Gabbert. And lastly on this, let me broaden this out. This age and purported infirmity stuff, which, by the way, has not been alleged in anything other than sound bites. There is no allegation that the office of president is not being fulfilled or is being fulfilled poorly in any way. This age stuff is becoming the conventional wisdom on TV news. And why it is becoming the conventional wisdom on TV news and why they keep saying this is sadly easily explained. Kristen Welker, the person NBC hired apparently to make Chuck Todd look not quite that bad in retrospect, asked Gavin Newsom Sunday if it was, quote, responsible for the Democrats to put Biden on the top of the ticket. And of course, when Bob Costas self-defenestrated, it was on CNN. About a month ago, one of the hosts on CNN named Abby Phillip, she's on 4 nights a week, I know you don't know who she is, stated, quote, nobody wants Trump. Nobody wants Biden, as if it were fact and not the product of the Beltway bubble in which she and everybody who works on her show and everybody who knows her lives. And given the ratings, that's not a lot of people. But the mentality here predates this by decades. It is, in fact, ancient. It dates back to when TV news owned the nation. There has always been a kind of FOMO at every national TV news operation. Fear that the other guy will say something that you did not say. Look, a presidential race in which both candidates were enfeebled would be an easy thing for stupid people like Kristen Welker and the NBC News chairman Cesar Conde to digest, and thus easy for them to sell. It is also easy to use as a promotional tool. It's an ongoing storyline, like Clinton Lewinsky was, like the Iran hostages were for ABC and Nightline in 1979 and 1980. The day the Clinton Lewinsky story broke, one executive turned to another in the MSNBC control room, pointed at a monitor and shouted, "We have found our Nightline, and that guy is our Ted Koppel." Unfortunately, he was pointing at me. TV news people, especially in Washington, most of them are not smart, and they live in dread that somebody else will get and dominate the next running story. So even if everybody else is saying the same thing and the same thing is nonsense, especially if everybody else is saying nonsense, they will hyperventilate at the thought that they might not say it as well. It is the emperor's new clothes. We have to report this. They reported it. I always think back to a day in 1983 when I was working in the CNN Washington bureau covering the return to town after their Super Bowl victory of what were then the unfortunately named Washington Redskins. I had just finished producing my taped report when the bureau's chief assignment editor ran in, breathless, with a video cassette. "Reagan!" she shouted. "Reagan just congratulated the team on camera. Here's your new lead." And I looked at her and said, no thanks. No offense. Politics really doesn't fit into this. It's a sports story. She turned white. She called my boss. She called my boss's boss. Happily, my bosses at CNN Sports trusted my judgment. Then, anyway. And Reagan trying to turn a football game into a campaign point, that didn't happen. Not in my story, anyway. The next morning, when a CNN Washington anchor reported on the team's return to D.C., she led into my report, but first, she played the Reagan soundbite. This is why you have heard this utter nonsense about Biden, and you will continue to see this utter nonsense on NBC because CNN said it. Because if CNN says it, and NBC doesn't say it, and some ratings on some show at NBC News are lower than executives expected, they will decide it is because we at NBC did not say this about Biden. And they say it because ABC said it. And ABC said it because CBS said it. And the problem with this is that somewhere at the start of this mechanism, one of them said it because Fox News said it. And Fox News said it because Trump said it. And that's why Bob Costas and everybody else needs to shut the F up. about Biden's age. Also of interest here, yes, the subject is how with it people are. And Friday, I promoted the upcoming live podcast, The Countdown with Keith Olbermann, State of the Union postgame show, and I said it was on December 7th. That'd be March 7th. December 7th would be going back in time. I'm skilled, but not that skilled. As to today's news, there is nothing big and new, but lots of follow-ups that are new, like Kenny the Cheese lying to prosecutors about the Trump fake electors scheme, and James Comer's star Russian plant witness is not fleeing anywhere. And yes, you are not crazy. If Trump lost 40% of the Republican vote in another primary, yes, he is in trouble. So much trouble that even Axios, Politico, and Matt Drudge noticed that he's in trouble. And there is reportedly a price on Tucker Carlson's head, and that price is $4,000. That's next. This is an all-new edition of Countdown.
This is Countdown with Keith Olbermann.
Postscripts to the news. Some headlines, some updates, some snark, some predictions. Dateline 30 Rockefeller Center, New York. Artist's entrance. On his way in to record a guest shot with Seth Meyers at NBC last night, President Biden was asked when a Gaza ceasefire could start, and he answered that one is close, hoping by Monday.
My national security advisor tells me that we're close. We're close. It's not done yet. And my hope is by next Monday, we'll have a ceasefire.
Two options here. This is 100% accurate and in good faith, and there may be a ceasefire by Monday, and Biden has adroitly walked the Middle East tightrope and really will get that ceasefire, which would utterly undermine the he's too old argument, or it's enhanced a little, maybe sketchier than he lets on, but he said it just in time to make the Network 630 newscasts and the Seth Meyers interview, and in plenty of time to hit the pro-Palestinian voting bloc in today's Democratic primary in Michigan, which would also utterly undermine the he's too old argument. By the way, Joe Biden said that while he was eating an ice cream cone. No comment yet from Bob Costas. Dateline Los Angeles, Smirnoff on ice. U.S. District Judge Otis D. Wright II has ordered James Comer's favorite Putin plant, Alexander Smirnoff, held without bail, apparently until trial after he was rearrested for lying to the FBI. His accomplices, clients, and or victims, the House Republican caucus and Trump, have not been charged. Yet. Originally arrested in Nevada and then ordered but released by the judge, special counsel David Weiss took the unusual step of refiling against Smirnoff in California. And he was arrested again at his lawyer's offices, and Weiss was nice enough to hint that he thought the lawyers were trying to help Smirnoff flee the country. As it relates to the Republicans' disastrous attempt to smear Hunter Biden and impeach his father based on Smirnoff's lies, you almost wonder if it would have been better to let him flee, maybe to Russia. But there are so many windows in Russia. By the way, Hunter Biden testifies behind closed doors to the House Oversight, and we really mean Oversight Committee tomorrow. If things roll out honestly, next year, James Comer will be testifying at his own trial. Dateline Ann Arbor, Trump ambulance chaser Kenny the Cheese Chesbrough, under indictment in the Georgia electoral subversion case, told investigators in Michigan that he did not have a Twitter burner account and he did not ever advocate any extra legal means of stealing Michigan's electoral votes in 2020 and somehow getting them assigned to Trump. CNN reports, oh, yeah, he actually did do that. His lawyers confirmed the account Badger Pundit was Chesbro's burner, and from it on November 7th, 2020, Chesbro tweeted, quote, "You don't get the big picture. Trump doesn't have to get courts to declare him the winner of the vote. He just needs to convince Republican legislatures that the election was systematically rigged, but it's impossible to run it again, so they should appoint electors instead." That's Kenneth Chesbro, and he is in a world of hurt. Dateline South Carolina. Trump has declared the Republican primary is over, even though the polling average showed him leading Haley in South Carolina by 28 points, but he wound up only winning by 20 points. In New Hampshire, the same average, which is compiled by 538.com, was an 18-point Trump lead, and he only won there by 11. In South Carolina, he can claim anything he wants, but even Matt Drudge's headline was 40% of Republicans vote against Trump in South Carolina. Even more shockingly, this headline, Trump's demographic problem, which was atop Axios.com, and this one, the warning signs in Trump's South Carolina romp atop Politico. Moreover, Politico's top White House guy noted that slightly more than 1 out of 5 Republican primary voters told Exit Polling that they will not vote for Trump. And if that number were to hold, it would be Biden by 100 electoral votes. I understand everybody at Politico has now been fired for this. A lot of often reliable political analysts have been noting that Trump's support in the primaries is about where it was in 2016, around 60% in the Republican primaries. But at this point in 2016, Trump was running against 11 opponents, including 4 governors and 3 senators. He was beating 11 people by 60 to their combined 40. He is now beating 1 opponent by 60-40. There are no two ways about this. Trump is underperforming, and people should start reporting that. And Dateline Trump trials. Prosecutors in New York have preemptively asked Judge Juan Merchan for a gag order against Trump to stop him in advance from publicly disparaging witnesses in the Stormy Daniels hush money case, which opens next month. And do not be fooled, in the other New York trial, Trump has not filed the appeal of what is now, with interest, thank you for this data, Letitia James, the $464,805,000 he owes in the New York business fraud guilty decision. He has filed notice that he will appeal, giving him 30 days to raise that amount and more and put it into escrow, or he can't file the appeal. And just for the sake of fairness, I am willing to buy Trump Tower from Donald Trump. It has a nice view of the park. I'll pay cash. My offer is $27,999.99.
This is Sports Center. Wait, check that. Not anymore. This is Countdown with Keith Olbermann.
In sports, Dateline, the Grapefruit League in Florida and the Cactus League in Arizona, and baseball spring training. And we have a new explanation for why the new baseball uniforms look like they shrunk in the wash. All 3,000 or so of them shrunk in the wash for all 3,000 players. Tiny little letters on the backs of the uniforms, tiny little numbers. They look like you might have been able to buy them at a discount store. Although the part about see-through pants is a bit of an exaggeration. They've been like that for a couple of years. Still, when somebody tweeted about a home run in a spring training game over the weekend and wrote another massive dong for the Cubs, and was subtweeted with, when you don't know if the tweet is about a homer or the pants, that's pretty funny. Still, the explanation for this sartorial disaster, it is not as much the fault of the manufacturers, Nike and Fanatics, as it is the fault of Major League Baseball itself. My old friend and play-by-play booth mate at ESPN, Eddie Perez, revealed that baseball asked for its corporate logo to be moved and enlarged, taken from the very top of the back up by the collar to lower down below the collar piping. That threw off the whole back of the uniforms, and they had to make the letters and numbers smaller as a result. There is more hope than ever that the uniforms will now melt during the first real rainfall. Dateline 30 Rock again. Peter King, the NFL insider upon whom all the other NFL insiders and the NBA insiders and the MLB insiders and the NHL insiders are based, is retiring after 40 years on the beat at Sports Illustrated and later NBC, where he wrote The Monday Morning Quarterback, which Sam Flood at NBC moronically ordered renamed to Football Morning in America. I worked with Peter at Football Night in America, which was a real thing, and he was a pleasure. Most insiders make you adjust to their needs. It's understandable. Peter worked the other way around. Anybody mind if I take this call from the commissioner? Okay, I'll be right back. Excuse me, guys. Dead serious. Polite to the end. Peter's wife, Ann, also was the best baker spouse I have ever met in the industry. Carrot cakes, cookies, whatever, something new every week. I gained 175 pounds in 3 years on Football Night in America. Now it is Peter's chance to eat all that food. Only Peter King would note that he has attended 40 consecutive Super Bowls, so when you talk about the commercials and the other fluff and even the halftime shows, he really has never known what you've meant, and he's now looking forward to finding out next year. Godspeed. And Dateline Annandale, Virginia. Former Major League Baseball pitcher Jim Hannon has died. He won 41 games and lost 48 games over a 10-year stretch with Washington, Detroit, and Milwaukee, ending in 1971. He was a pretty good pitcher at Notre Dame before that. And what anybody who remembers him for that does not know was that Jim Hannon had a degree in business, and his college research paper was about the baseball pension plan. The paper was so good when the first real head of the baseball union, Marvin Miller, was seeking to shore up that pension plan, he relied on Jim Hannon's college paper from Notre Dame. And then in 1982, Jim Hannon did something wonderful. He founded and for 14 years led the Major League Baseball Players Alumni Association, advocating for ex-players in need and their families and launching scholarships and programs for ex-players to give back. Jim Hannon was far more than a pitcher who once won 10 games in one season for the Washington Senators. He was still chairman of the Major League Baseball Players Alumni Association when he died earlier this month. He was 85 years old. Still ahead of us on this all-new edition of Countdown, it'll be time for the first ever Countdown Baseball Spring Training Preview. This will be great if this is the year 1978. I have gone deep into the vault, and I will present to you what I got and what I put on the air after my first trip to spring training as a reporter, age 19. A scant 46 years ago this month. I had in things I promised not to tell. My voice had almost completely changed. First, yes, still more idiots to talk about, the daily roundup of the miscreants, morons, and Dunning-Kruger effect specimens who constitute today's worst persons in the world. The bronze, worse. It's a tie. Jonathan Allen, Matt Dixon, Garrett Hake, Vaughn Hilliard, Carol E. Lee, and Kristen Welker of NBC News. Why so many of them? I guess on the theory that they all decided, well, hell, they can't fire all of us for this crap. Their reaction to Trump losing 40% of the vote in the Republican primary Saturday night, an article with all of their bylines on it. Allen, Dixon, Hake, Hilliard, Lee, and Welker, titled Fewer grievances, more policy. Trump aides and allies push for a post-South Carolina pivot. Because we haven't had a good laugh at Kristen Welker's expense in hours. Or a good laugh at the idea that anybody actually paid to cover politics would fall for the idea of a Trump pivot in year 10 of Trump's insanity. A pivot. This first 10 years of him being baby Hitler and trying to run a coup and telling his mobs to kill people like NBC News employees, that was just prelude. Now he's going to pivot. The real Trump's going to come out. In the 36 hours after this NBC piece of crap and Trump's insistence that he no longer cared about Nikki Haley, Trump posted 11 different times about Nikki Haley. Oh my God, NBC, Saturday was the day Trump truly became president. Is that right, Kristen Welker? Bunch of idiots. Which reminds us of the runner-up, Worser, the man who put that moronic phrase on the map. Trump became president of the United States in that moment, period. Van Jones, guilty of premature jocularity yet again. The first time he said something as stupid as that was on March 1st, 2017. That was 3 years and 10 months before Trump tried to overthrow the government. Van Jones is also an idiot, that is well established, but he's hit a new high in low. Listen to this about Democrats and Republicans working together because otherwise the bird doesn't fly.
I've never seen a bird fly with only a left wing. I've never seen a bird fly with only a right wing, not even in Mississippi. We need each other. We need each other.
Van, the right wing doesn't want us to fly. The right wing wants to kill us and eat us. And oh, by the way, you know where Van Jones said that? He went to CPAC. Van Jones talked to CPAC at that conservative convention where they all completely disconnect from reality and where Trump compares himself to Nelson Mandela and Alexei Navalny, and Kristi Noem says Biden and Harris suck, which, given her extramarital affairs, is a curious verb to use. And Elise Stefanik referred to the Biden crime family, and not one person came out of the crowd to kick her squarely in the ass. And Matt Gaetz threatened aid to not just Ukraine, but also Israel. What were you doing there, Van Jones? That is disqualifying. You want to sit next to this guy, Schlapp? Take your chances with that? You go join the Republican Nazi Party. Go talk to them about bipartisanship. Talk bipartisanship with people who claim the plantation owners taught the slaves how to become blacksmiths. But our winner, the worst, Tucker Carlson. Somebody named Mario Nawful, as in awful but with an N, who makes stuff up and claims he's a news operation, is scooped yesterday quoting some site called Intel Drop, which itself claims to be a news organization based in Iceland or something. Tucker Carlson assassination plot foiled. No, I know it's not what you're expecting. He wasn't going to assassinate somebody. Apparently, somebody was going to assassinate Tucker Carlson and didn't. I know, what a sad day. Quote, Russian forces reportedly arrested a man for a planned attack on Tucker, allegedly orchestrated by Ukraine's intelligence. The plot allegedly involved an IED targeting Carlson's vehicle at the Four Seasons Hotel. Wait, the Four Seasons Kremlin? Tucker Carlson didn't stay at the Kremlin Motel 6? Also, I thought Russia was perfect. They have IEDs in the Four Seasons Hotel in Moscow? Man. But here is the real punchline. Quote, the suspect reportedly admitted to receiving $4,000 for the attack's execution. Tucker, there's a price on my head, and that price is $4,000. American Carlson, today's worst and cheapest person in the world! For years, pretty much until I left Los Angeles local news for ESPN in 1992, I tried to record every broadcast I did. Radio, television, Well, it was just radio and television. I was going to say something else, but it was just radio and television in 1992. I was often mocked for this because there was an element of ego to it, although really I needed to see if I was getting any better or worse. And I had a vague sense of, if I don't record these, who will? The end result, everybody now wants to hear my tapes and see my videos. And if I did it, I got it on tape somewhere, including whenever baseball spring training opens, this pretty good series I did, the Spring Training Journal, mostly my own interviews. I did it for WVBR-FM at Cornell in Ithaca, New York, just before the start of the baseball season of 1978. 1978.
And now, part one of the report on spring training. Via the magic of tape, we take you to a place where it is warm and sunny, Miami Stadium. Baseball people approach spring training from very different angles. Yankee manager Billy Martin has described it as a waste of time, an opinion that holds little weight with one of Martin's chief rivals, Earl Weaver of Baltimore.
I've been doing a lot of experimenting, playing people in different positions so that when you get north, if for some reason you have to get more offensive people in the lineup, that I can maybe switch an Eddie Murray from first to third base, which enables me to get Lee at first, move a hitter into the designated spot and different things. And you use spring training for that purpose. And sometimes you don't win a lot of games in doing it, but at least you're finding things out.
Not winning a lot of games is not necessarily a bad thing, however. In fact, too much success in spring training is feared by many, including Philadelphia's Danny Ozark. His club started slowly last year, and Ozark blames it on a hot spring training.
I think we were like 18-6 or something like that in the spring, and now the season starts, and it seems like everybody, not complacent, but everybody feels like, well, something's going to happen this inning and we're going to get some runs, and it just didn't happen. So what we're trying to do is kind of work up to this opening day. And
not all the players are happy with the way the camps work. Jim Rice of the Red Sox sees a need for a greater simulation of the regular season, especially for his club's pitchers.
To me, spring training is mainly to get in shape, and our guys are in shape, but I don't think they're really prepared because they go out and just only pitch 4 or 5 innings. I think in order to be a complete pitcher, you got to go out and go 9. Say, hey, I got to go 9 today. And I think when a pitcher walks out on the mound, he should have in his mind, hey, I want to go 9 innings.
Tomorrow in part 2 of our series on spring training, a look at the readjustment some ball players have to go through. Now let's go to part 2 of our spring training journal. For some baseball people, spring training is a time of readjustment. Trades, hirings, firings, and now the free agent system make for strange faces in strange uniforms each spring. For Bobby Bonds of the Chicago White Sox, it's almost old hat. For the third time in 4 springs, Bonds joins a new club, but this year at least, he says he's not uncomfortable in his new surroundings.
What really helps out this year is that the guys on the team are good individuals, and they really are. The atmosphere of the whole team is good. It stems from the front office with Bill Veck and through Bob Lemon. It comes right on down with the players. So I don't feel like a stranger really anymore. I feel like I'm a complete part of the ball club, the whole structure of it. And I don't feel that there's one individual that I can't go to talk to.
Other players go from losers to winners. John Matlack suffered through 6 seasons with the New York Mets. Now he is part of a major contender, the Texas Rangers.
It's a good feeling to come from a team that was once a contender and sort of slipped downhill a little bit to a team that is now a contender. So, anytime a situation like that arises, you've got to feel good about it.
While Matlack moves from the bottom to the top, the route was reversed for Bobby Cox, first base coach for the world champion New York Yankees last season, manager of the doormat Atlanta Braves this year.
I enjoyed my first year in the big leagues with the Yankees as a coach, and naturally we went on to win the pennant and the playoffs and the World Series and everything, and it was really an exciting year. And I went to this club, which finished dead last year, but I've enjoyed every minute of it.
And then there's Fergie Jenkins, who goes to a new and old team in '78 as he returns to the Texas Rangers. Jenkins was last a Texan in '75, and he sees a difference this time around.
The team is a little more experienced. They have a little more depth. They have more experienced ball players. I think that the biggest thing is that this team is a contender now. Over maybe the 1 year when I was with Billy Martin in '74, we made a push to jump on Oakland, but we came up short. But this year it looks like that the team could do it.
Tomorrow in part 3 of the spring training series, a look at a team that operates on a wing and a prayer, Bill Veck's Chicago White Sox. And now to part 3 of the spring training journal. The Chicago White Sox seem to have found a new way to be competitive. In these days of millionaire free agents and discontented stars, the Sox go for the low-scale free agents, the comeback players, and the rent-a-slugger system. Last year it was Eric Soderholm, a third baseman recovered from the junk pile after a season of inactivity due to a knee injury. Soderholm is a student of psychological conditioning, and he thinks if you put somebody on the spot, he'll produce. Soderholm also thinks that the Chicago owner feels the same way.
Bill Maher's got that idea now with this year's camp. You can buy 60 players in the camp, and then there's so many people battling for so many jobs, it puts everybody on the spot. It forces you to produce.
This year, the recovery project is Ron Blomberg, who has come to bat twice in 2.5 years due to recurring shoulder and leg problems. So far this spring, Blomberg is healthy, but don't remind him of his past physical infirmity.
Oh, don't talk about injuries to me. I had enough in my career. I just go out there and do the best I can. I think I'm doing quite well for the amount of time when I have been playing. I'm hitting the ball fairly well. I'm not swinging with a lot of power, but I'm hitting a lot of line drives. I think for being out for 2.5 years, I think I'm doing a remarkable job so far.
Last year, Chicago's here today, gone tomorrow sluggers were Oscar Gamble and Richie Zisk. This year, it's Bobby Bonds, who, although he may be in Chicago for only one season, promises to be a team player.
My main concern each year is to go out and contribute. If I go out and I can contribute to the team, and I stay healthy, I will help the team. And I will have a good year on my own because I will be doing what the team has expected me to do. But to say that it's important, the most important thing for me to hit 40 homers and steal 40 bases, and we don't win, no. I want to contribute to a winning cause, and whatever that takes, that's what I want to do.
The White Sox, the formula is cheap, efficient, unique, and most importantly, it works. Tomorrow, as our 5-part series continues, a look at spring training for a losing team, the Atlanta Braves. Now here's part 4 of the Spring Training Journal. Of all of baseball's losers, probably the Atlanta Braves are the most unique. Spring training for them has to have highlights other than a view to a successful season, and such a highlight was presented this year by the appearance of Jim Bouton in the club's minor league camp. Another highlight? Colorful owner Ted Turner's tongue-in-cheek description of Mr. Bouton.
He's got a lot of talent. He can play baseball, he can write, he can announce, and he's plenty smart. We can use a guy with a lot of talent like that. Well, who knows? One of our writers that's traveling with the team might come down with a flu or something and fill in a lot of different positions.
Would Turner take advantage of Bouton's notoriety and call him to the majors as a publicity stunt?
I don't know. It's Bobby Cox. There's the manager of this club and Bill Lucas. All I do is try and pay the bill.
But the presence of a manager never stopped Turner. Last year, he temporarily took over the Braves as skipper, replacing Dave Bristol. Bristol is gone now. Bobby Cox is the new man in charge. He's running a camp of 46 players, only 14 of whom were major leaguers on opening day of 1977.
Really, we're just trying to give everybody a chance to play and see as much of them as we can, because we're kind of unique in most spring training camps, in that we've got a lot more decisions to make. Most camps have maybe one change in their starting lineup or so, and our eyes and ears are open, and we have meetings a lot with our coaching staff, and the instructors are in camp and evaluate all the talent that we have, and we're going to break north with our 25 best.
It might only be the best 24. The Braves may not be able to afford that last player, which brings us back to owner Ted Turner.
All I do is try and pay the bill, and that's, believe me, that's a big job too. I'm not sure that the challenge facing me this season won't be the greatest.
The Braves, not the best, not even secure, but certainly not dull. Tomorrow, in the final part of our series on spring training, where were you when the lights went out? And now the 5th and final part of the Spring Training Journal. The differences between spring training and the regular Major League Baseball season come out in minor ways, subtly, like that one night in Fort Lauderdale. Right here in the middle of the 6th inning, the bottom of the 6th, between the New York Yankees and the Atlanta Braves, just after Mickey Klutz had hit a ball down the first baseline, the lights suddenly went out. They remain out. A lot of flash bulbs are flashing because the fans are taking pictures of the darkness, which doesn't make too much sense in itself. But anyway, the Yankees were leading here 6-2 when the lights suddenly went out. Some people are lighting matches here and there, calls for play ball. But the lights, all the towers here, there are about a half dozen of them, they're all out right now. And hidden by the darkness, the evil that lurks in the hearts of men came out into the open. Now the players are all converging around the Atlanta dugout, while a group of fans has apparently run out into the field in an attempt to get third base. I think they're fans. What are they out there? Yes, they are, and they're being led from the field at this point. A couple of fans went out to the field during the darkness here and attempted to snatch third base, but a couple of security officers caught them there and stopped them. During all this, Atlanta owner Ted Turner and Yankee president George Steinbrenner sat helplessly in the dark. Finally, somebody found the light switch. from the crowd as some of the lights have gone back on, the lights in the press box, and now the field lights. And with the exception of the two field lights out in left field, they're all back on now. Just two more, and there they go. So it looks like they'll be able to resume. Ah, yes, spring training and the regular season just ain't the same, but soon the change from exhibitions to the real thing will take place, and starting Monday on World Report Sports, we'll take a look at the divisional and league races for 1978. And that's the early sports tonight. I'm Keith Olbermann. Have a very good weekend. Molly Cummings back with more sports tonight on Late Edition at 11. Carol?
Thank you, Keith. It's 5:57. The stock report right after this word from Garage de France.
When I found the cassette those were recorded onto in March 1978, I was surprised to find on it that I had done and completely forgotten a live promo for that series. I had done it by phone from Miami Stadium, then the home of the Baltimore Orioles, and it was done live on our 5:30 newscast in Ithaca, and I was in Miami on the Friday that spring break ended, and the Friday thus that my trip to Florida ended. This was actually done, it suddenly flashed back on me as well, about an hour after I had been sitting in the stands at the beautiful old Art Deco ballpark in Miami, and I had recorded all those narrations in that series you just heard. This was the preview.
And now Keith Olbermann reporting from the Miami Stadium.
Thank you, Mike. I'm perilously perched here in the press box high atop Miami Stadium, a charismatic old place that looks a little bit more like a metal barn than it does a ballpark where the Baltimore Orioles and Cincinnati Reds will play tonight. Yet, if there is one thing that a week in the baseball spring training camps teaches you, it's that appearances can be deceiving. The uniforms are major league, and so are the players, but what's been happening on the field certainly is not, and that counts both before and during the actual games. For where else but spring training would you hear Thurman Munson singing Short People? Where else would a Yankee player apologize to a sports writer? And where else could you see owners Ted Turner and George Steinbrenner sit helplessly by as the game between their two teams is halted by a short-circuit blackout? Nowhere else but spring training. Then there are those things you expect, like contrasts. Why, just day before yesterday here, the Baltimore Orioles hosted Los Angeles. You guessed it, here's effervescence for you. Tommy Lasorda, manager of the Dodgers.
Feel great. I can't wait till the season begins. I've told everybody I got a weight problem. I can't wait till it all begins. And I'm just ecstatic about this ball club, and we're going to have a lot of fun, and it's an honor to be associated with outstanding players, but above all, they're outstanding young men.
And the contrast? How about Earl Weaver, who thinks everybody's on his own?
This is an individual sport. If you get enough individuals out there on the field doing their job and doing their job right, then it becomes a team. If that doesn't happen out on the field, no matter what happens in the clubhouse, it doesn't make any difference.
Two very opposite ends of the spectrum. Spring training means a lot of things to a lot of people. Right now, to me, it means a bad sunburn. But anyway, what spring training means to certain people will be the subject of a 5-part series next week on World Report Sports, and the week after, we'll have a preview of the upcoming season. That's it from here in Miami. I'm Keith Olbermann. Back now to Mike.
What would World Report Sports be without Keith Olbermann?
I've done all the damage I can do here. Thank you for listening. Countdown musical directors Brian Ray and John Philip Chanel arranged, produced, and performed most of our music. Mr. Ray was on guitars, bass, and drums. Mr. Chanel handled orchestration and keyboards. It was produced by TKO Brothers. Other music, including some of the Beethoven compositions, were arranged and performed by the group No Horns Allowed. You know, it occurs to me that interview you heard, which I did with Ted Turner on the field at spring training in March of 1978, that's 3 years before I went to work for Ted Turner. And it's 4 years before I nearly had a fist fight with Ted Turner at a story about Ted Turner that I was covering for Ted Turner. The sports music is the Olbermann theme from ESPN2, written by Mitch Warren Davis, courtesy of ESPN Inc., which didn't exist when I recorded those reports from Florida. Our satirical and pithy musical comments are by Nancy Faust, the best baseball stadium organist ever. Our announcer today was my friend Larry David, and everything else was pretty much my fault. So that's Countdown for this, the 252nd day until the 2024 U.S. presidential election and the 1,148th day since Dementia J. Trump's first attempted coup against the democratically elected government of the United States. Use the 14th Amendment, use the Insurrection Act, use the justice system, use the mental health system, use the election to stop him from doing it again while we still can. The next scheduled countdown is tomorrow. Do not forget our live YouTube special after the State of the Union on the night of Thursday, March, not December 7th. Bulletins as the news warrants. Till next time, I'm Keith Olbermann. Good morning, good afternoon, good night, and good luck. And now it is time for him to shut the up about Joe Biden.